Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and nevers say nevers, as we're back with our breakdown for the show's finale. I know I stopped covering this because of other commitments, but I have been watching it week to week, and so far I've really enjoyed it. The 6-episode season, set in an alternate Victorian London, follows the Touched as they attempted to break free of the stigma centered around them and their incredible abilities. Unfortunately, this was easier said than done, as a touched killer called Maladie started to commit crimes in the capital. It was up to our main cast of characters including Frank Mundi, Amalia and Penance Adair to get her, and after the good detective managed to bring her in, episode 5 saw her being sentenced to death. There's also been a plotline involving Lord Masson, who we discovered was behind the assassination of one of the Touched named Mary. Masson had taken her out as she had the ability to reach out and uplift the Touched, but this backfired as her death rallied more of them together. We ended episode 5 with Maladie's public hanging, but there was a twist when we saw that one of her shoes fell off to reveal she had some missing toes. If you cast your mind back to earlier in the season, then you may remember that there was someone devoted to Maladie who did this, and she indeed gave her own life in one final act. It turned out that Maladie had been posing as Effie Boyle, who was actually the girl that turned up dead at the start of the season. Maladie revealed that this execution was all part of her plan to kill members of the public, and using electricity and her assistant, several of them were taken out. That sort of takes us to the finale of season 1, and in it we discover the true identity of Amalia. It turns out that the character was originally a woman named Molly, who used to be a baker's apprentice. She was in love with a man named Varnum, who wasn't ready to get married, and after she was demoted at work, she was left with no other option than to marry a man named Mr. True, who's what would happen if this channel was a person. Wait. Now Molly sadly suffered with several miscarriages and was forced to work as a delivery woman for the bakery for next to no money. After True died, Molly was left to care for his bedridden mother, and this left her as a widow with no money or enjoyment in life. It's super depressing, and watching her travel down the alleyway day after day, knowing that Varnum is with someone else is really heartbreaking. After leaving a note for Varnum, one day instead of going left down the alley, she decides to go right, and as we know, Molly ended up jumping into the Thames. It was during this moment that the Galanthi arrived. She was taken over by a character called Stripe, played by Claudia Black, who came from the future, and I can't believe we actually got this fan theory right all the way back in our episode 1 breakdown. You best believe that Mephisto is coming soon, I'm telling you. Now in this entry we learn a lot about Stripe and the backstory of the Galanthi, which are so mysterious that even most of the actors in the show don't know how to pronounce it. I probably butchered it too, but the clues were there, including True saying that Amalia wasn't her true face. We also caught her looking into the mirror more than Perseus. Sometimes the jokes aren't good. She also had great skills and abilities, and the fact that her character died just as the aliens arrived sort of tipped its hat to the twist. The theme of switching and fake identities was of course also seen in Maladie's reveal, and I like this idea of both the good and bad not being all that they seemed. Now I don't know if people found the twist all that mind-blowing or if they guessed it early on, but whether I found it predictable or not, there was still a lot of mystery in the alien race. So I did like that the show made you feel like you could see into the future much like True, whilst it also managed to keep some surprises. Now we discover that the Galanthi are an incredibly powerful alien race who travel to our planet far into the future through portals. Using spores, they were able to give members of the public special abilities, and those touched by the Galanthi were able to understand their tech. This meant that certain members of society were far more advanced than others, and it caused a lot of conflict. Episode 6 opens not in Victorian London, but far in the future, which we learn is in the midst of a civil war. Humanity is divided on the Galanthi, and while some believe they are there for good, others are fearful and hate the race. This episode is divided into several chapters, with the first being titled Stripe. This chronicles the conflict between the extremists known as Free Life and the PDC, which stands for the Planetary Defense Coalition. We follow Stripe as she comes across someone who has been touched by the Galanthi, and the pair discuss several aspects of their world. After they exchange gunfire and manage to capture one of the Free Life, they search a deserted outpost which we discover held one of the Galanthi. Here a PDC scientist loved the alien and took care of it. The pair discover many of his things, including an obsession with Victorian London, which of course ties into the general plot of the show. I had to watch this chapter twice as picking up here was very jarring, and much like us, Stripe has difficulty keeping a grasp of her reality because of the self-medication she has subjected herself to. The character suffers from PTSD, and Den of Geek recently dropped an interview with Laura Donnelly discussing everything that we need to know about her. Donnelly said she had difficulty keeping a lid on things when the season first launched, and that she simply stuck to saying that she was playing a Victorian woman instead of the war-hardened, combat-ready one who fought in a planetary war far in the future. We also get an indication that she is Amalia, as the character puts her fingers to her thumb as she's being treated, which is one of her many mannerisms. The PTSD moments she suffers from also give her flashbacks, which are sort of a reworking of the flash forwards that Amalia gets. We learn that Nitta is the other of the two, and she was initially part of the Free Life. However, after she was spored, she changed sides. Along with the rest of the group, they work their way through the base until they discover one of the Galanthi. The Free Life that captured the base didn't have the ability to kill it, and thus instead they tortured it by killing everyone there that it cared about. We learn that it's opened a portal that could potentially allow more of the Galanthi to travel to Earth, and the group have a tough choice to make. Many worry that the Galanthi will return with even more of their forces to level the planet, which leads to one of the members swapping sides. He frees the captive and also shoots Nitta. Stripe kills him, and after Nitta dies in front of her, she journeys to the medical bay to end her own life. She decides that enough is enough and drinks 2 bottles of lethal liquid. However, just as she's about to die, the Galanthi embraces her and carries her spirit with it. We discover that it didn't open the portal to bring more forces in, but rather it wanted a means of escape, and together the two travel into the past. This is where she bonded with Molly, whose backstory makes up the second chapter in the episode. Now if you're enjoying the video, I'd massively appreciate the thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe for breakdowns like this each and every day. From here, chapter 3 follows Stripe, now occupying her body, and she's taken to an asylum believing that it's all a simulation. Now sporting an American accent and seeing the future, she meets Sarah, who we know goes on to become Maladie. It's not too long before she also meets the doctor at the asylum, who we learn is Horatio Cousins. She realizes that he's one of the touched, and the pair start having an affair after she divulges her true identity. She learns that, unlike in her time, the Victorian sport have superpowers rather than simply being able to understand the Galanthi tech. One day Dr. Haig arrives to study the touched, and Amalia lies about what's really going on with her. Unfortunately, she throws Sarah under the bus, and this of course has repercussions for the future. Amalia realizes that there are nefarious forces out there that will attempt to use her, and that she must bury the truth. She starts putting on an English accent and learns etiquette lessons from another patient in order to fly under the radar. She readies her body for the incoming fight and also starts to collect weapons. During a hearing for her freedom, these are discovered, and Amalia ends up being locked in a padded cell. This is where Lavinia Bidlow arrives, and she ends up making her the head of her orphanage. From here we jump to the final chapter titled True, which picks up at the same time that Maladie is apparently being hanged. Amalia and co are excavating an underground site in order to find the Galanthi, and after she falls into one of its cavernous tunnels, she discovers where Dr. Haig had been carrying out his research. Much like how it was in the future, the Galanthi is trapped in the ceiling, and it now has several harpoons pointed at it. Amalia feels like she's very much been left in the dark by the creature, but after putting her hand on its chamber, she receives a vision. This shows both her life and Molly's, and we also catch a vision in which she tells Penance about who she is and how grim the future is. However, Penance is confident that they can change it, and this is likely the reason that Stripe was brought back. The future isn't set, and as we know from our history, the touch didn't exist in Victorian London. Thus their intervention could alter the future significantly, and it's clear that the series will be about averting a war. However, they could also now have inadvertently created one, as the government of course greatly fear the touched and are putting things in place in order to cause chaos. In the vision, we also hear a voice saying that Amalia isn't the only person that's there from the future. I'd obviously love to hear who you think this is, but I personally believe that it could be Haig. He knows a lot about the touched and may even be a member of the Free Life. However, it could also be Myrtle, who we do see in this vision. Myrtle is able to speak almost every language imaginable, and as we learn from Nitta, in the future the sport's powers are more language based. We also know that she understood what Mary's song truly meant, so it is possible that she's just another vessel sent back to translate their messages. There's definitely a number of people it could be, and probably not even any of these ones I've listed, so yeah, let me know below exactly what you think. Now Haig's forces arrive and Amalia manages to escape through an elevator, which is lifted by Elisabetta, who you may remember was one of the Doctor's victims. The season ends with Amalia saying the Touched are gonna have to prepare for war, and she finally gives her true name, which is Zephyr. We watch as a prototype Zeppelin flies over the orphanage, and in the season wondering what's to come. Zephyr itself means a light wind, which could be carrying this, and yeah, that's a reach. Now as for my thoughts on the series as a whole, I think that it's a bit of a weird one to judge. Obviously there's a lot of controversy surrounding it because of Joss Whedon, and behind the scenes we know that it's going to be a while before we see the property again. Philippa Gosler is currently being tapped to replace Whedon, but because of the pandemic and so-called changing of the god, the earliest we can expect to see the show's return is 2023. Now I am optimistic that the series will continue, and they definitely saved the best for last. This was easily head and shoulders above the rest of season 1 for me, and I think anyone who watches this will be very excited for season 2. I definitely think that there's a lot here people will enjoy, and there's some great twists and turns in the series as a whole. Unfortunately, judging it as a whole, I do feel like there's a lot of spinning plates too. Now the Touched are of course what I was really interested in, and whenever we're following True or Maladie, I think the season really showed what it could be. There was a lot to like there, and I think that if they had focused more on those moments, it would have sorted out the pacing issues too. I think they should have just been where we spent our time, and a lot of the side stories and subplots just didn't really work for me. The finale was great because it focused on the story and giving us answers. I just wish that it didn't take so long for us to get there. So I do think that there is potential for something to be done here, and that the show will continue to get better and better. I'm optimistic that this might even become one of HBO's great series, as there's definitely more good than there is bad. I really enjoyed this finale, and though some of the episodes leading up to it were a bit hit and miss, I think I do like the Nevers. Yeah, I will be back. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and your theories as well, so make sure you comment below and let me know. As a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize drawn the 30th of May, in which we're giving away 3 copies of the Godzilla vs. Kong collection. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the series. The winners of last month's competition are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Love, Death and Robots Season 2, which will be linked on screen right now. We've gone over the ending of all 8 episodes and discussed what we took from them, so it's definitely worth checking out if you want to know more. That out of the way, thank you for clicking this. I've been Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.